Today, I'm going to talk about the value of informal leaders in culture change. I think that this is a really underappreciated concept and one that leaders really should be familiar with. These are my disclosures. So what we're going to talk about today is the definition of what an informal leader actually is. We're going to discuss how you can identify informal leaders so that you know who they are, talk about the value of what they bring to an institution or an organization, how you can leverage a leader, either formal or informal, and then some of the dangers associated with this. So let's look first at definition. I think when we talk about leadership, most of us have this concept of the positional or formal leader. So these are the people who have the titles. They're your division director or your program director or your chair of your department. But there's a lot to be said about informal leaders who are really those people that don't have a title, but still wield a lot of power and influence amongst the people in the organization or in the department. The value of informal leadership really cannot be underemphasized. These are people who are going to help you steer the ship either towards or away from a direction. And so it's very important to understand who they are. So as I mentioned, the formal leaders are the people who have those positional authority titles. So they're your chairs or your section chiefs. They're appointed or elected into a position of authority. They're recognized as the people who are in charge, right? They're the ones who you expect to go to, who are expecting to be able to direct change, direct organizations, make policies and procedures. They have the formal title and that gives them positional authority. On the other hand, informal leaders don't have any kind of title. They're not appointed or elected into these positions, but they have equal amounts, if not more, of influence on groups and organizations. They are people who are recognized and followed by the group based on their own personal attributes and their actions, and not necessarily based on a title. And I will say that just about anybody can be an informal leader in the right setting. This is a fantastic book. And I think it really highlights a lot of the concepts of the value of informal leadership and how everyone can really step into these roles. It's called You Don't Need a Title to Be a Leader by Mark Sanborn. Fantastic book. And I really think it highlights how everyone can have value and leadership skills in different situations. How do we identify these informal leaders so that they can be recognized and that we can leverage them to meet the organizational needs? How do we recognize them? Do we figure out who they are? Do they recognize themselves and step forward? What's really the secret sauce to figuring out who they are? Well, I think a lot of it involves listening and looking. If they don't self-identify, which very often they won't because they tend to be very understated leaders, you have to try and figure out who they are. So you really want to be aware of what the situation is. Who, if you're in a group setting, does everyone look towards? If you raise a concept or a question or you ask the group for some feedback, where do all eyes in the room go to? What's the body language of that person? Are they sitting there very relaxed? Do they look tense and anxious? Are they engaged in the conversation? Are they looking around, turning back to look at their peers if they are representing the group to speak? What is their tone like? Are they confident? Are they respectful? Are they engaged? What do they sound like? Do they sound like they have the power to speak? Do they sound confident? And what is the vibe they're putting out there? Are they people who are really afraid to put forward their thoughts? Or are they people who are sitting at the front of the room, feeling the energy from everyone else, looking at the other people in the room for feedback or for confirmation that what they are saying represents the thoughts and feelings of the group? That's going to be very important as you're trying to figure out who these people are. And the culture that they set about is very important. So you may ask the question, who really sets the culture in a group setting? Is it the formal or positional leader, or is it the informal leader? And I think the answer depends on the situation and the group, but it's very important to figure out who is setting the culture and if both parties are actually aligned with their cultural expectations. If, for instance, that the formal leader has an expectation of a certain culture, maybe it's an inclusive, embracing culture, and they feel that they're setting this up and doing a good job, but the informal leader doesn't agree and starts to set a different culture, they won't align and things can be very difficult and may not be in alignment of the mission of the organization. So let's get real. These are a little bit squishy in terms of what we're talking about. And so are there any things specifically that you can help to do to identify who these leaders are? and separate them from other people who would like to be these informal leaders. And I think one of the things that can be helpful to figure out who are these informal leaders who are going to have the best interests of the group at heart is to really separate them from the complainers. People who are informal leaders very often will bring up a concern or something that they would like to discuss, but they do it in a positive and inquiring way with an air of inquiry, not one that is complaining and they want a solution, but more like this is something that they see as a problem. They would like to be engaged in the conversation and they want to bring it up in a way that is respectful and will be received well by the formal leader. These are people who command the respect of their peers. I mentioned already, all the eyes in the room are going to go to that person. They're the people that are very well spoken of by everybody you talk to. They are ones that really, people will come to you de novo and say, hey, I just wanted to let you know that so-and-so did this. They did a great job for us. So they really do command the respect of their peers. They always cast positive light on others. So they will make an effort to say, this person did this in this setting. I just wanted to let you know about it. But they're also on the other side of it. There are people that people will speak very positively of when they're not in the room. So they say, you know, so-and-so was able to get this problem sorted out for us. We're really grateful. They always come and listen to what we have to say. So it really is a mutual respect of casting this positive light on others and bringing it to the awareness of the formal leaders. With informal leaders, when they have ideas that they are circulating or socializing, they very often will become a reality. So if you think about those informal leaders that come to you with a respective air of inquiry, who really are respected by their peers and the people they represent, and they come to you with something that they want to change or something that they think might better the situation, how likely are you to listen to those individuals? Probably very likely. They're socializing ideas. They may or may not be their own ideas. And they often won't take credit for them. They will just try and get the ideas out so that they can improve the lot for their peers. And because they are so respectful and approaching with an air of inquiry and not a negative or difficult confrontational style, those ideas very often will move forward and go on to affect real change. These individuals of informal leaders will very often help marginalize the people who are disruptors to the cohesiveness of a group. They understand who the problem children are, for lack of a better word. They understand who is contributing to the good parts of the organization or the peer group, and those who are detracting from either the cultural setting or the positive culture of the organization, or they are preventing things from getting done or moving forward. And they will help to marginalize those people so that they don't have the opportunity to really bring negative vibes to the remainder of the group or to derail things that they are trying to accomplish. What about those other people who have their own agendas? So not the informal leaders, but the people who want to be the informal leaders or have something that they want to see accomplished. How do we recognize those people and make sure that we don't fall into that trap? Well, like I mentioned for the informal leaders, those are people who are trusted and are well respected, and it's very clear that they are well respected. People who tend to complain with their own agendas in mind and not necessarily the benefit of the group are often dismissed by their peers. So you will see that people who tend to have a lot of negative emotions or concerns or complaints or are never quite satisfied tend to be marginalized a lot, both by the informal leaders and also by their peers. They are not necessarily fully listened to, they're very much dismissed. But however, they can really be a source of frustration to the group. It's the negative Nellies, right? It's the whole concept of these people are just never satisfied, like Mr. Grumpy Cat over here, and they just bring the mood down. So they've really earned disrespect as opposed to our informal leaders who earn respect of their peers. They're the ones who always cast negative light on others. They don't speak positively of things. They only highlight the negatives that either an individual has done or that has happened in a situation. They are not necessarily spoken of at all, or if they are spoken of to a formal leader, they aren't necessarily spoken of in a positive light. So it's just a very negative environment all around. And even when they have fantastic ideas that may really bring around true and effective change, they very often can't happen because they become so marginalized and their reputation is such that they are not taken seriously. Even those good ideas will go to the graveyard and die and not move on to where they could really affect important change. So you really do want to have those informal leaders who can socialize good ideas, even if they come from people who don't necessarily embrace the ideas or should be marginalized based on their constant complaints. So what are some of the traits of informal leaders? I think one of the biggest traits of informal leaders is that they are very good at connecting and building relationships. I think we've all learned over time that trust is earned and it's really critical in effective relationships. And these informal leaders are really good at that, not just relationships amongst their peers, but also relationships with others in the area. So it could be a formal leader that they have a relationship that they are developing or cultivating. It could be their classmate. It could be the remainder of the team that may not be necessarily the people they interact with consistently, but they build these relationships and they have very broad networks and they're well respected in these networks. They build trust. They also understand how highly matrixed these organizations are. And so they understand, at least conceptually, the organizational structures that we all need to work within. And they figure out how to connect with people and to work within the system to get things accomplished. They build trust. That's really important. I think that this is really critical. They are trusted by their peers. They are the first person to volunteer to help to do something without expecting anything in return. They're just do-gooders. And they're early adopters of different policies, principles, theories. They're not afraid to try and to see what can come out of something. So they really do adopt things early. And I think the reality is you just sort of know them when you see them. It's like Aunt Minnie, right? You know Aunt Minnie because she looks like Aunt Minnie. You know them when you see them. And you can look for the clues that will help you to know them when you see them. How are they interacting with their peers? What are they saying? What's the tone? What sort of interactions are they having? Are they polite and respectful? And do they treat everybody the same? Do they interact with the formal leader in a different way? Are they confrontational or are they collaborative when they're having conversations, even when raising concerns? Are they people who can demonstrate respect? Or do you feel like you're being a little bit patronized? Those can be clues to tell you whether this person is genuine and relational and is really an informal leader, or whether they are one of those other category. You also want to look for their body language. Are they sitting forward, engaged in embracing the conversation? Are they just sitting back, not really listening to what you're saying, showing disrespect? Do they have the same body language when interacting with their peers? So you really want to be very tuned into this body language to see if they are really having honest conversation, if they are engaged, if they are just blowing you off. You really want to have those sorts of things that can help direct you in terms of their relationships with you. And I can't highlight this enough. You have to be aware of imposters. I think we sometimes can get fooled, certainly at the formal leadership level, by thinking that someone is the informal leader, that they are the real deal because of the way they interact with us. They show that respect, they show that willingness to have bidirectional communication, they're sitting forward, they're engaged in the conversations. We think that they have the informal power given to them by their peer group, and we take what they say seriously, and so we will sometimes make decisions based on what we think is the feedback from these informal leaders. But you have to be careful because sometimes the way people interact with the formal leader is not truly how they interact with their peers. So it's important to have somebody who's on the ground in that peer group who can keep you on the straight and narrow to understand if these people are imposters and are just representing themselves as the informal leaders or the representatives of the peer group, or if they truly are the real thing and are people that you should continue to build these sorts of interactive bidirectional relationships with. So what is the value of an informal leader? Do they have values in organizations? And I would say 100% they do. They are the people who are really critical in helping to build and maintain effective teams. You don't want to be this guy hanging down here without this guy as your informal leader being able to direct the flow of how the climb is going to go and supporting you, and you know you can trust him and that he will lead you to safety. They're great at being foundational building blocks for groups. They see the whole picture. They can be the person who is building everything up from the ground up and making those pieces fit so that people understand how their relationships to each other can be positive, bring a positive culture, and build organizations with missions in mind. They are very good at getting collaborative teams together. They help to cement the teamwork that we unfortunately have started to see be somewhat lacking in our departments and organizations based on the effects of COVID. These people are really good at getting groups together. So they are the ones who will often suggest, hey, let's go for a walk and talk about something, or maybe we should all go out for liver rounds on Friday night so that we can get to know each other better, or I'm going to have a barbecue at my house so that you can all bring your families and we can get to know each other better and spend some more time. They really do work hard to bring that collaboration and relationships with the others in their group. They are the glue that holds these people together. You can feel it in your own peer groups. When that person's not around, who do they turn to in the room? They're sort of, people are a little bit lost when their informal leader is not necessarily in the room, particularly when higher level conversations are happening. And you'll find that the responses to questions are a little bit more disorganized when that person's not there to shepherd the process. They really are like the glue holding these groups together. They help to define the culture. And it's very important to make sure that their culture aligns with your culture so that you can continue to move forward in a mission-aligned manner. They can advocate for their peer group. So I've mentioned this a few times where they really become the speaker of the house, so to speak, for the groups, that they are the ones bringing forward things that may be troubling or problematic or that you didn't know were an issue, and they bring it forward to the formal leader. They can also advocate, because of that bidirectional relationship, they can advocate for their group in a way that it is going to be heard and listened to and respected, and that they really can be very impactful in that way. And they can really steer the ship in times of difficulty. If you think in your own smaller peer groups, when things happen, who do they turn to and who can help to bring the tension in the room down, to bring everybody back to an, okay, let's take a step back, take a breath and figure out how we approach this. Let's keep our boat sailing smoothly through these rough waters. It's these informal leaders. They really can help you to really take that tension down and to make everyone see what the bigger picture is so that we can continue to steer the boat through this really challenging time. I think we particularly saw this during COVID, where there were lots of different informal leaders who stepped up in different situations to help us navigate through this really challenging time. And they're also really important for morale. They can boost morale. So I mentioned things like, organizing events. They don't even necessarily need to do that. They could just say, hey, let's go for a cup of coffee and celebrate some of the successes we've had today. Or, wow, I'm in a really great mood. Let's everybody get there. But they can also be morale busters. If they are not on the positive side, they can really bring down the morale in the group, particularly if they are respected. So if they're having a hard day and things have happened to them, they may actually bring down unintentionally the mood of the group. So it's very important to recognize, as that informal leader, how you show up and how your mood impacts the rest of the group, because they really will reflect how you feel. All right, let's talk briefly about leveraging the leader. So why would you want to leverage a leader, either formal or informal? Who does the leveraging and how do you do it? Well, I think the why is sort of obvious. You want to leverage these informal leaders to try and keep groups cohesive. They can really be that peer representative, as I've mentioned, for bidirectional information sharing. So you really want to leverage their knowledge of how the group is doing and feeling, or how they're responding to something that you have proposed. They can really be your thermostat for the feelings of the group, and they will use that trust that you have developed to be able to share this information in a collegial and cooperative manner. They can also be very useful to help you deliver messages to the group as a formal leader. They can frame the intent. So if you spend the time to explain to them that these are the reasons that we're considering making this move, this is the information that we're going to impart to the group, these are some changes that have to happen for various reasons, how would you suggest that we share it with them? This is why we're thinking this. We really believe this. They can help to smooth out those conversations, because they can have the conversation before the conversation. If they believe in it as well, then it's very, very beneficial, because they can help to share their trust in the process and in the formal leader and understand why these changes need to be happening. And that's going to increase the likelihood of the success, because their peer group have trust in them. And if they really understand, even if they don't agree with the changes that have to happen, they can help to smooth out the way. And they can help you to accomplish goals that need to happen. So I think that leveraging these individuals can be very beneficial for difficult conversations and difficult changes that have to be made, particularly in our highly matrixed organizations. So who does the leveraging? Is it the formal leader or the informal leader? And I think the answer is both, but depending on the time and what the situation is. So for instance, the informal leader may want to bring to the formal leader a change that they would like to see affected for whatever reason. And we'll use an example of a call pool change. The informal leader may be representing their group to say, we would like to change either the frequency or the intensity of call. These are the reasons behind it. This is what we would propose as the potential solution. And they can leverage that information with that trusting relationship they've built with the formal leader to try and affect that change. The same goes for the formal leader. We piloted a program in our own residency where we were interested in exploring a change in our chief structure for various reasons. And so what we did was we convened a group of informal leaders, one representative from each class, and we had a discussion with them about why we were thinking about changing the model that we had in terms of a chief structure, what we saw as the benefits, what we saw as the downsides. We asked for their feedback in a group setting with just the four of them. We got some really good feedback. We asked them to go out and socialize the concept, to talk to their peer groups. Each class rep wouldn't talk to their own class, and to bring us back some of the feedback and concerns. And then we convened the whole group, and we had these informal leaders sort of present the concepts of the entire group. And I think that it was well received. We didn't end up changing the structure, but that was okay. It was more the exercise of having tried to do it. So I think that there are ways that you can leverage these informal leaders to at least explore difficult concepts. And then they can actually leverage each other. For instance, we would love to increase our complement of our trainees. The informal leaders can get the feedback from their cohorts and figure out why this would be beneficial or not beneficial to them, but mostly beneficial. The formal leaders can also discuss why they think a complement increase would be beneficial. And then the two parties can work together to have different voices sharing the same mission with the higher level leadership. And this can be a very effective tool. So how do you do it? Well, again, I think it goes back to this concept of trust and bidirectional information. You have to really meet frequently with these informal leaders to build the trust. I think you should be trying to meet frequently with as many people as you can in your smaller parts of your organization, because that just continues to build trust and relationships with everyone, and things work better that way. But particularly for these informal leaders, it's really helpful to meet with them frequently and build their trust in you and your trust in them. Sharing your vision for where you'd like to go and how you'd like to get there with these informal leaders can be very impactful. If they understand what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it, and that you're being honest and authentic and true to them, that can be very, very helpful when you are trying to effect change and people don't necessarily understand your vision, or you can't articulate it in a way that resonates with them because they see you on a different level than they would see their informal peer leader. So having them share your vision and the reasons for it can be very impactful, but you have to have that relationship and spend the time to share your vision with them. You should always ask them for feedback and engagement. You know, we as formal leaders very often think we have all the answers, and I think we all should recognize that that's not true, and that we have our own biases and ways of doing things and our own perspectives that don't necessarily reflect what the peer group or the people who are reporting up to you think or feel. So having somebody who's got boots on the ground, is embedded in that report up group, is very helpful to understand what it is they feel, how your words are landing on them, and how to change your approach so that you can have much more collegial and collaborative interactions. And just take off your blinders. You don't know everything, and you don't necessarily know how your words are going to land on somebody else. So be open to asking for feedback and pushback, and ask for it. I always want somebody to push back an idea I have, and may not like it that they're pushing back in terms of, you know, I think this is a fantastic idea and I want to run with it, but maybe I don't have all the information, or maybe I'm looking at it with my own lens and I can't see what I'm wanting to do will impact someone else, or how it might have a tumble down effect that I haven't figured out. So I think it's really important to ask for pushback, and you have to be authentic about it. You know, we will always say, I want you to push back on me, but if people don't trust you, they're not going to push back. So I think that trust, again, is a real key driver in this. And know when to get these informal leaders involved. make sure that you are getting them involved at the right times and that you're always willing for them to step forward and say that they think that they should be involved in a conversation. All right, danger. There is always danger, Will Rogers. So what are the dangers? I think we've sort of touched on the dangers from informal leaders if they don't align with what your vision or mission is and the change that you would like to see happen. So again, aligning them onto the same page with what it is that you're trying to do and why, and making sure that there's not a subculture that's happening where they are leading people in an opposite direction is really critical to be successful in both having a positive interaction and a positive culture, but also to making sure that you are able to affect necessary change. But there's also danger to these individuals. I mentioned before, you have to separate them from the complainers. They do a pretty good job of marginalizing people who aren't speaking up with the best interests of the group in mind, but they can be very persuasive. And if these informal leaders who don't necessarily have a lot of experience or training hear a lot of buzzing in their ear from the same people over and over again, first of all, it can really bring them down and make them not necessarily want to represent the group. But it can also plant that seed that maybe if they keep hearing the same thing over and over again from the same individual, maybe they start to listen. So I think it's important to help them recognize who are the divisive individuals who have their own agendas and not acting in the interest of the entire group, and help them to separate from them. You got to shield them from others. You know, the informal leaders often take the flack for either speaking up or for decisions that have been made because they are informal leaders and they're seen to represent the group. If something doesn't go right, they may be the ones held accountable for the group not getting its way. So it's really important to have these conversations with them, make them understand that they have this little banner of authority, a cloak of authority on them, and that they are not always going to be fan favorites, particularly if the outcomes are not what the group wanted, and to give them a little bit of room to grow their own personal skins so that they can protect themselves, and also to have an outlet so that they know that they have somebody who will back them up if the situation goes south. Try and engage them. I already mentioned having them involved in important conversations, but try and engage them in lots of different things. You know, see if you can kind of push them a little bit out of their comfort zones and see if they can figure out ways that they can improve things by doing it themselves without necessarily it coming directly from the formal leader. See if they can engage with their own peer groups. And you should always, always, always try and mentor them and others. Everyone needs leadership development. It doesn't matter who you are, what your focus is, everyone needs some leadership development. And that comes in many different ways, but mentorship is one of the things that you can do to help everybody grow. So always try and mentor these individuals. And then give them a toolbox. You know, informal leaders are very good at having established some of their own skill sets, but they don't have it all, and trying to help them develop their own toolbox so that they can continue to grow and be successful and don't necessarily face some of the pitfalls that they might face can be very beneficial to them. And what you want to think about in your toolbox are really kind of a couple of main things. One is emotional intelligence. By definition, these informal leaders sort of have a lot of this because they're listening to the people in the room. They're trying to reflect on how they're responding to things. They have those social skills and they have the motivation to help affect change. But they do need to have a little bit of support in understanding that this is all emotional intelligence and these are skills that you can give them to build their emotional intelligence more and how they respond to situations more. And then you also want to make sure that you help them to understand situational awareness, those how to avoid getting into those difficult, sticky situations where maybe they shouldn't put their toe in the water, or where there may be a lot of flack coming back at them for the situation, and helping them to figure out where they need to take a step back, think about how they're putting things forward, or take a step back and approach somebody else to see if this is a good way to move forward with a conversation. So you want to help them to develop their own situational awareness. And I'm just going to end there and encourage everyone to be a leader and build up an informal leader.